Imagine finding out that something you do every single week in your own kitchen, something you do specifically because you are trying to be practical, trying to save money, trying not to waste food, is quietly and systematically creating the conditions for one of the deadliest cancers in the human body without you knowing. Does that sound extreme? Unfortunately, it is not. There is a habit that hundreds of millions of people repeat every week without a second thought: reheating leftovers. And the truth about what happens inside three very specific foods the second time heat touches them is something that most people will go their entire lives without ever being told. In the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly which three foods are the most dangerous to reheat, what they are chemically turning into inside your body when you press that button, and why that transformation connects directly to one of the cancers with the lowest survival rates in all of modern medicine. Pancreatic cancer. My name is Dr. Blessing Akintola, and I am going to tell you something today that I believe every single person who cooks at home deserves to know. Because I have sat across from too many patients who received a devastating diagnosis and looked at me and asked, "Why did nobody warn me about this sooner?" I am done staying quiet. Now here is what you need to understand before we begin. Your pancreas never warns you. It does not hurt when it is being damaged. It does not swell. It does not send you a signal while the damage is quietly accumulating over years and decades of repeated chemical insults at the dinner table. By the time a patient feels the first symptom of pancreatic cancer, the back pain, the jaundice, the weight loss that will not stop, the disease has almost always been developing silently for years. The 5-year survival rate for pancreatic cancer is approximately 12%. 12%. That is not a disease that gives you a warning before it destroys you. That is a disease where what you do before symptoms arrive is the only strategy that consistently works. And some of what feeds that destruction is sitting in your refrigerator right now, waiting to be reheated for tomorrow's lunch. Before I name the three foods, I need to explain what reheating actually does at the chemical level inside food. Because once you understand this, nothing I say after it will sound like a warning. It will sound like the obvious truth it is. When you cook food for the first time, a series of chemical reactions happen. Proteins interact with heat. Fats begin to change their structure. Natural compounds in vegetables react with oxygen and temperature. Most of these reactions produce small amounts of potentially harmful compounds, but the body has protective systems to manage them. Antioxidants neutralize some. Liver enzymes break down others. The damage is small. The defense is adequate. Reheating changes this equation completely. The second time you apply heat, two important things happen at the same time. First, the protective compounds in the food, the natural antioxidants, the protective plant chemicals, have already been partially destroyed by the first round of cooking. The biological buffers that helped neutralize harmful compounds are weakened or gone. Second, the chemical reactions that produced small amounts of dangerous compounds during the first cooking are restarted. But this time, there is less protection standing in the way. In certain foods, this second round of heat also drives a specific set of chemical reactions that produce substances classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as probable or confirmed human carcinogens. These are not vague health concerns. These are specific compounds with specific documented pathways to specific cancers, including pancreatic cancer. I want you to understand one more thing before we go to the foods. These compounds do not cause cancer overnight. They do not cause cancer from a single reheated meal. They cause cancer the same way most cancers develop, through repeated accumulated exposure over months and years that gradually damages the DNA of specific cells until those cells stop following the rules. The danger is not dramatic. The danger is consistent. And consistent is the word that describes how most people reheat these three foods. Let me tell you about a patient I will call Patricia. Patricia was 64 years old. She was a retired school cook, which means she had spent her professional life feeding people and managing food efficiently. She was careful with her health. She walked every morning. She cooked from scratch every day. She was not someone you would look at and identify as a high-risk patient. She came to me after her gastroenterologist found abnormal tissue during a routine scan. Not yet cancer, but the kind of cellular changes that put every oncologist on alert. When I sat with Patricia and reviewed her daily habits in detail, one pattern emerged that she had never connected to her health. Every evening she cooked a large pot of food. Every morning she reheated last night's leftovers for breakfast. Every afternoon she reheated the remaining portion for lunch. She had done this with the same 3 categories of food, in rotation, for over 12 years. She looked at me and said, "Doctor, I thought I was being responsible." She was. By every standard measure she had been taught, she was being responsible. Nobody had ever told her what those 3 foods were doing the second time they were heated. We will come back to Patricia, because what happened to her cellular picture after we changed these 3 habits is one of the most powerful things I have seen in my clinical career. Food number 1, processed and cured meats. This is the food that most people think they already understand the risks of. They know processed meat is not health food. What they do not know is that the specific danger multiplies dramatically the second time it is cooked. Sausages, hot dogs, bacon, ham, cured deli meats, any meat that has been preserved using nitrites or nitrates as part of the manufacturing process. These foods carry a chemical risk even before they reach your kitchen. The nitrite preservatives used in manufacturing react with proteins called amines inside the meat during the production process. This reaction produces compounds called nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are not a minor concern. The International Agency for Research on Cancer places them in its highest risk categories, with documented carcinogenic pathways in multiple organs, specifically including the pancreas. This is what most people do not know. When processed meat is manufactured using nitrites, nitrosamines begin forming before you ever buy the product. You are not starting with a clean slate. You are starting with a food that already carries a baseline load of these compounds. When you reheat processed meat, especially at high temperatures, especially in a microwave or a frying pan, you are applying heat to a food that is already carrying documented carcinogens. Heat accelerates the formation of additional nitrosamines. It also produces new compounds called heterocyclic amines, formed when amino acids and creatine in muscle meat react together under high heat. Heterocyclic amines are also classified as probable human carcinogens by the IARC. Studies examining the relationship between dietary nitrosamines and pancreatic cancer risk have found a consistent association between high intake of these compounds and elevated cancer development risk. The practical conclusion is direct. If you eat processed meat, eat it once. Fresh from the pan or fresh from the package. Never reheat it. The first cooking is already a chemical event. The second cooking is adding accelerant to a reaction that should never have been repeated. If you have leftover cooked sausage or ham, eat it cold the next day rather than heating it again. Cold does not drive the nitrosamine forming reactions. Heat does. Food number 2, eggs. This one surprises people more than any other on this list. Eggs are considered one of the most nutritious foods available, high in protein, rich in vitamins, recommended by nutritionists worldwide. And that is true, when they are freshly prepared. What happens to eggs when they are cooked and then reheated is a completely different story. The protein structure of eggs is extremely sensitive to heat. When eggs are cooked the first time, the proteins unfold and set in their cooked state. This is normal and harmless. When eggs are reheated, those same proteins are exposed to heat again in their already altered state. Under this second round of heat, 2 specific chemical reactions accelerate. The first is called protein oxidation. The proteins in the egg yolk and egg white begin to oxidize, producing compounds called protein carbonyls. Protein carbonyls are markers of oxidative damage, and research has linked elevated dietary protein carbonyls to increased cellular oxidative stress, which is one of the contributing factors in the development of cancers, including pancreatic cancer. A study published in Food Chemistry found that reheated eggs showed significantly elevated levels of protein oxidation products compared to freshly cooked eggs. The second reaction involves a compound called cholesterol oxide, formed when the cholesterol in egg yolk is exposed to repeated heat. Cholesterol oxides, also called oxysterols, have been studied extensively in the context of cellular damage. Research published in the journal Nutrients found that dietary oxysterols contribute to oxidative stress in the pancreatic cellular environment, creating conditions more favorable to abnormal cell development. Beyond the cancer research, reheated eggs also pose a bacterial risk that is rarely discussed. If scrambled eggs or boiled eggs are left at room temperature before being stored, bacteria multiply rapidly in the protein-rich environment. Unlike some bacteria, the protein toxins produced during storage survive reheating completely. The heat kills the bacteria. The toxins remain active in the food. The solution is simple. Cook eggs fresh every time. It takes 3 minutes to scramble 2 eggs. Those 3 minutes protect you from a chain of chemical events that have decades of accumulation behind them. Eggs are not a food you prepare in advance and reheat. They are a food designed to be eaten immediately. If you have made it this far, you are clearly invested. You want to see what happens next. But most viewers enjoy the content and scroll away without subscribing. If this one really means something to you, tap subscribe. It takes a second. If not, you will probably forget this channel exists and miss a lot of great educational content ahead. Food number 3, potatoes. Potatoes are the most widely consumed vegetable on Earth. They are filling, affordable, and available everywhere. And reheated potatoes, specifically potatoes that were cooked and then left to cool and sit before being reheated, carry a cancer risk that almost no one is talking about. Here is the chemistry. When potatoes and other starchy foods are cooked at high temperatures, especially baked, roasted, or fried, a chemical reaction occurs between the natural amino acid asparagine and the sugars present in the starch. This reaction produces a compound called acrylamide. Acrylamide was classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as a probable human carcinogen in 1994, based on strong evidence from both animal studies and human epidemiological data. It has been specifically linked to increased risk of pancreatic, endometrial, and kidney cancers in multiple large-scale population studies. Here is the critical detail about reheating. The amount of acrylamide in potato-based foods increases with temperature and with cumulative heat exposure. The first round of high-temperature cooking produces an initial load of acrylamide. When those potatoes are reheated, especially at high temperatures, especially in an oven or air fryer, the acrylamide-forming reaction continues from exactly where it left off. The longer the potatoes sit before being reheated, the more the natural sugars in the potato continue to break down and become available for the acrylamide-forming reaction. Reheating then drives those available sugars forward into additional acrylamide production. A study published in the journal Food Additives and Contaminants found that reheated potato products showed significantly higher acrylamide concentrations than the same products consumed immediately after initial cooking. The difference was not small. In some preparation methods, reheated potatoes contain 2 to 3 times the acrylamide load of freshly cooked potatoes. There is also a second danger in reheated potatoes that connects directly to intestinal health. When cooked potatoes cool, a portion of their starch converts into what is called resistant starch. This is not harmful in itself. But when resistant starch is reheated improperly, particularly if the potatoes were stored at room temperature rather than immediately refrigerated, they become an excellent growth medium for Clostridium perfringens and other heat-tolerant bacteria. The toxins from these bacteria survive full reheating and contribute to chronic, low-grade intestinal inflammation over time, which is an established pathway to gastrointestinal cancers. The safest approach to potatoes is to cook in smaller quantities so there is less left over. If you do have leftover cooked potatoes, refrigerate them within 1 hour of cooking and eat them cold the following day. Use them in a cold potato salad. The cold potato will still provide the nutrition and the resistant starch without the acrylamide formation triggered by a second round of high-temperature heat. I promised I would come back to Patricia. After we identified the pattern in her weekly cooking habits, we made 3 specific changes. She stopped reheating processed meat entirely. She began cooking eggs fresh each time rather than preparing them the night before. And she switched from reheating roasted potatoes to either eating them cold the following day or cooking fresh in smaller amounts. She made no other changes to her diet. She took no supplements. She changed nothing else about her lifestyle. 6 months later, her follow-up scan showed something her gastroenterologist described as encouraging. The cellular abnormalities that had been present had not progressed. In fact, several of the markers of cellular stress in the surrounding tissue had improved. She sat in my office and said, "I cooked this way for 12 years because I thought I was being sensible. You are telling me that sensible was the problem?" That is the gap. Not a gap in her intelligence, not a gap in her intentions, a gap in the information available to ordinary people making ordinary kitchen decisions every day of their lives. That gap ends today for everyone watching this video. Let me bring this together clearly. 3 foods, 3 completely different chemical mechanisms, 1 shared outcome, repeated, accumulated exposure to compounds that the International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies as carcinogens, specifically connected to pancreatic cancer pathways. Reheated processed meats produce nitrosamines and heterocyclic amines, documented carcinogens that have been specifically studied in the context of pancreatic cancer risk. Eat them once, never reheat. Reheated eggs produce protein carbonyls and cholesterol oxysterols through protein and cholesterol oxidation reactions. These compounds increase oxidative stress in pancreatic tissue. Cook them fresh every time. 3 minutes is all it takes. Reheated potatoes, especially at high temperatures, produce significantly elevated levels of acrylamide, a confirmed probable human carcinogen linked to pancreatic, endometrial, and kidney cancers. Cook smaller quantities. Eat leftovers cold. Never reheat at high temperature. None of this requires you to stop eating these foods. None of this requires expensive supplements or complicated diets. It requires 3 specific changes to how you handle 3 specific foods in your kitchen. Starting with the next time you open your refrigerator. Which of these 3 surprised you the most? Tell me in the comments right now. I read every single one. And if this video gave you something that changes how your family cooks this week, please share it. There is someone in your life who reheats these foods every single week without knowing what they are doing to themselves. You can be the reason they find out before they need to. Subscribe to this channel. Every week I bring you honest, clearly explained medical information about the things that matter to your health and the health of the people you love. Not trends, not influencer advice, just the science, explained so that it actually changes how you live. I am Dr. Blessing Akintola. Protect your health with the information your kitchen never came with. Disclaimer. Everything shared in this video is general medical information based on published food science, biochemistry, and oncology research. It is not personal medical advice for your individual situation. Cancer risk involves many factors, and no single dietary habit causes or prevents cancer on its own. If you have concerns about your cancer risk or your diet, please speak with your own doctor. They know your history. This information is a starting point for that conversation, not a replacement for it.